kids sometimes come into your life. I know this because we just had one.
Right.
And, certainly, I have a lot of questions for you because there are a lot of things that have to change, not only about where you're spending your money, but also, obviously diapers comes to mind.
Absolutely.
But some of the bigger picture financial items outside of diapers and formula that have to be really considered.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you, working with people who are going through transitions in their life, this is certainly one that people must ask you for advice on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Sometimes you plan for children. Other times they kind of come without being planned for. But either case, they're there, and you need to figure out, okay, how's this going to impact your life?
Right.
Yeah. So one of the things that you might consider is your house big enough, right? So if you have to remodel, do you need to relocate? That might be a challenge. I remember when our son and daughter had their first child, well, we only have one bedroom. Now we've got to move to at least a 2-bedroom house. Then now they've just recently learned that they're going to have their fourth, which was a complete surprise.
Hopefully they got out of that one-bedroom place.
Absolutely.
By now. Yeah. It's interesting. It's not just the number of bedrooms that you talk about.
Right.
My wife, I had a guest room with a closet, and that was where my closet was. Well, now we've had to join closets, which to me is fine because, as Heather knows, I have like 7 shirts. But to my wife, that was 7 less things she could have in the closet, which was very stressful to her.
Storage can be an issue.
Yeah,
and where are you going to put all those diapers?
That's right. Well, if they went where I used to keep my clothes. So it's really, but that of course comes down to money. If you're talking about remodeling or adding rooms, that's something that has to be considered, obviously.
That's right. And speaking of money, all of a sudden now you've got more food to buy. You've got education, things to think about. Are you going to homeschool?
Mm-hmm.
Are you in the right school district? Are you happy with that? Do you need to relocate for that reason? And ultimately, what do you think about college funding, and when are you going to start that? Or is that important? Is that a priority? So those are other financial aspects.
Yeah. And those are some of those bigger picture items I think that I find to be, tougher to maybe grasp because you start thinking about college. It's very difficult to think about college and diapers at the same time.
Right.
It just doesn't quite, mix.
Right. And it's amazing, though, how those years go by in a flash. Isn't it amazing how your son is already 2?
Yeah.
And it's like he was born yesterday, right? Doesn't it seem like, it's just going so fast?
It does go fast.
Yeah. Yeah. So realizing that, you do want to take advantage of the things that are going to be coming up. They're going to be wanting, be involved in sports, those types of activities. When
you start thinking about, you talked about school.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a take on private school versus public school when people are talking about from a financial route?
Right. What's interesting is you're going to pay the taxes whether they go to the public school or not, unfortunately. But we've had the good fortune of being able to have my wife stay home and actually homeschool.
Oh, wow.
And so we homeschooled our kids for most of their education, and then they finished up high school in a private high school, which was fantastic because they learned so many different things so well. Now my grandchildren are being homeschooled, and my 4- and 6-year-old granddaughters can now skip count all the way through 15 times 15.
I don't even know what skip counting is, let alone how to do it.
It's counting by 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
okay, like 5, 10, 15, 20.
Yeah, exactly, all the way through 15.
Wow.
And they know general history.
How do you skip count by 13s?
I know, it's like, but they learn it by song. It's amazing.
Wow.
The stuff that they learn from song. They know so many different things that people, high school is when you start learning stuff like, the things that they've learned. So
yeah. Do you tend to think that when you start thinking, just the financials of going to private school? You talked about you're paying private school or you're paying taxes either way.
Right.
Do you tend to think that a lot of people put their kids in private school that maybe don't need to, and it really can suck their finances away from their retirement or other things that are going to be important down the road that maybe... I guess it's a balancing act, but it's like kids' elementary school, retirement.
Well, yeah. But remember, it's your children who may end up supporting you in retirement.
There you go. You'll remind them of that,
if you make those mistakes, right? So
you remember when you went to private school in first grade, buddy? You remember that? Yeah. We're going to need you to start paying that back.
Right. No, it's good to have a good education, and if you're not happy with what the school system's offering, then do something about that, because that is your child's future, right? And you certainly don't want to be supporting your kids when they're in their 30s, right?
True.
Right.
Yeah.
So you want them to be on their own and successful. So a good education helps.
That's true. Glen Thiessen joins us. Glen, the next thing I guess you started talking about was the income.
Yeah.
And it's the income can change because you may decide from a dual income to a single income family. There's
That's right.
a lot of things to decide there.
Yes. Are you going to have a career change? Are one of you going to be able to stay home? Daycare really costs a lot. And when you think about a second career and all the taxes, after-tax income, and the costs of homes, it can be overwhelming. So perhaps putting some of that money into your own, private school education, for the kids, that can help.
Well, I mean, daycare, you're not kidding when you say it's expensive.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of incomes. I mean, a lot of people go to work, and they'd work just to have their kid go to daycare.
Right.
It can be that expensive. We looked at one to have 2 kids. It was like $4,000 a month.
Yeah.
For 2 kids, and we're like,
yeah.
That will not be where we're going.
Right.
But, we actually ended up hiring a nanny full time for not even near that.
Sure. It's very expensive. So when you think about all those costs and then your after-tax income, what if you were to take a break from a career for a while, have that relationship with your children, give them the education that can surpass and exceed what they would otherwise have gotten in the public school. And I'm just saying it's not for everybody, but the thing is those are some important things to consider.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think? When should people start a college fund? I mean, in talking about with kids and whether it's private school or not,
right?
Certainly, college will probably trump the dollar amount of private elementary school.
That's true.
And I actually heard a number, something along the lines of out-of-state school, at its current inflation rate, would be like $400,000 over the course of 4 years.
Right. And you're talking 20 years from now.
Right. But isn't that kind of like Apple stock? I mean, it can't go up forever. Eventually, nobody can afford it.
Well, only the elite will be able to afford it. But again, if your income's not going up, then that does become out of reach. So you've got to have an increasing income along the way. How do you do that? That might involve a career change. But if you already like what you're doing, but it's not paying enough, then there's just really tough decisions to make along the way.
Yeah.
Well, what if the kids were to work their own way through college, right? Does it mean more to them if they participate in the effort? I think it would mean a lot more to them rather than having it just given to them. Right?
A lot of personal decisions, it sounds like, have to be made more than necessarily financial decisions, where you're weighing a lot with values and what's important to you, maybe just as much as you're understanding what you can afford.
That's right. Then when you talk about when children come along, you need to update different things like beneficiary arrangements, on your IRAs, your 401ks, annuities, life insurance, transfer on death accounts, and that kind of thing. Other things to consider are their security in the event that you're not around for their entire, years of growing up. So who is going to be their guardian, for example, if something happens to you along the way? And who's going to raise them? And who's going to manage their assets? And it could be 2 different people. So
yeah, and even just to talk about that for a second, that is a harder process than people think.
Yes. Who do you trust? Who would do a good job as you would, but you're not there to do it?
What are you up to, Glenn?
Taking care of grandkids.
So, I mean, when you go through that, how do you determine maybe who gets the kids, who gets the money? Because I've heard some squabbling over those things before.
Right, absolutely, and it's really who shares your values in your family, because different family members will think different ways, and when money gets in their pocket, it just it reveals a lot about character, right? So who would raise your children as you would? That's the key issue right there.
Especially if you're homeschooling, you're really going to need to make sure you pick appropriately, huh?
That's right.
That's a big commitment.
Yeah.
What else, Glenn? Tell me. I mean, we have a few minutes left. Tell me a little bit more about some of these considerations people need.
Not only should your beneficiary arrangements and estate documents be updated, But I would say that you might want to check to make sure your parents' estate documents are up to date, because what if they don't update their estate documents, and now all of a sudden your new child is not kind of part of the total plan of estate distribution?
Sure.
See, so that might be something to consider. Has your trust been updated? Have these things been updated to include the new members of the family? Yeah. So intergenerational considerations are really important, because that's a lot of times overlooked, and then people get disinherited unintentionally, and there's hard feelings.
Yeah, well, certainly that's a good list for people to think of and to kind of go through. I mean, I guess as a checklist, but it's kind of the beginning, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, there are so many things. And parenting, as you know, is a learning process. Nobody goes into it as an expert, and no matter how much you read about it, you don't know how your children are going to respond, how you're going to raise those children. It's so many new things that come up all the time, and it's just a learning process.
Yeah. When you start going and learning that process, is there a way that I guess you would recommend people to, I guess, have a plan, at least from the financial side, so that they feel like they are being adequate on the financial side as they learn to parent? There are some money things that you don't necessarily have to learn the hard way.
Right. And it does help to have some of that, kind of given to you rather than, like you say, learn the hard way. I think it's really important to go through systematically these issues and more. And I do that with people for a very reasonable, it's a process that we go through over a 10-month period of time, where we make sure that all these things are updated. And it's very reasonable. $500 up front, $300 per month for 10 months, you're done. And by the end of the 10 months, all of these things are up to date. You have an idea of what you want to do, and where you're going with your new children. So
well, yeah, and you talk about there's some factors about taking these things one step at a time and allowing yourself, like you say, maybe it takes 10 months just to get everything set up.
Right.
But it just takes time. It's tough to find time.
And it can be overwhelming if you try to take too much on at one time. But as you systematically work through these different things, then you can actually accomplish it.
How do you help people get started?
Well, generally there's a questionnaire to find out where you're at today. What's your situation and what are your concerns? And then we start right there and take one concern after another, and then we make sure that all of these different things are covered by the end of the 10-month period of time.